All right, I need everyone to take your seat, please. We need to get started. Take your seats, please.
Welcome to Chit Chat in the lobby.
Yes. All right, I need for you guys to get quiet. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the second of two public hearings on the 22-23 budget. We are here tonight to review the proposed property tax rates and the budget of the 22-23 school year. Hear comments from the public and approve the proposed millage rates and the budget. The order of business and actions taken tonight must follow specific directions set forth in the state statutes, and we ask for your cooperation as we go through this legally required format. There will be two opportunities for you to speak this evening. First, you may comment on the proposed mileage rates, and second, you may comment on the proposed budget. If you wish to speak, you must register separately for each part of the hearing with our staff members at the entrance to the boardroom. On behalf of the school board and the superintendent, I thank each of you for taking the time to be here tonight to share your views with us. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Do I have a motion?
We adopt the agenda.
Second.
Okay. All right. I don't vote on this yet, do I? No. Oh, okay. All right. All those in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it passes. All right. Mr. Hendrick and staff will make some introductory comments prior to the presentation and before we hear comments from the public. Mr. Hendrick?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, board members. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your input into the budget process, starting at the June 28th school board workshop, all the questions that you had then, those that you had at our first hearing on July 26th, where the tentative millage rates and preliminary budget were first approved. As you know, the budget is tied to our district strategic plan, which you earlier approved tonight. The budget before you tonight is for the final proposed budget and the millage rates for this 22-23 fiscal year in accordance with state statutes and procedures that guide our work as a school district. And so I'd like to pass it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Kevin Smith, for more details. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Hendrick, Madam Chair, school board members. As was mentioned, this is the second and final hearing on the district millage and budget. The format and order of tonight's hearing presentations are prescribed by Chapter 200 of the Florida statutes and must follow a specific order. The materials available at the first public hearing in July provided comparative information relative to the projected fiscal year closeout. The 2023 fiscal year has been closed, and the actual results are reflected in the second public hearing documents. As we have discussed many times this year, we are all experiencing the effects of inflation. The district is also subject to those inflationary pressures. We have experienced increased energy and fuel costs, increased materials and supply costs, as well as increases in maintenance and construction costs. In addition, we will incur increased costs for our employee health insurance, as well as the required contribution for the Florida retirement system on behalf of our employees. The Florida legislature also passed a law this year requiring the minimum wage for Florida school districts to be $15 per hour by October 1st, 2022. That's approximately 4 years ahead of the constitutional amendment that was passed a couple of years ago. While it is an absolutely good thing for our employees to have that increase in wages, and we're fully in favor of it, this is yet another requirement that comes without specific funding, and we have to find money to fund it. All of these factors and more present challenges when formulating this budget. We will continue to examine our budget to maximize the effectiveness of the spending decisions we make, as well as to continue to increase the salaries of our employees, as we did in each of the last 10 years, including last year, by the way, when we increased salaries for teachers, support, professional technical supervisory employees, and administrators by 3.25%, retroactive back to the 1st of July, in addition to picking up the entire cost of health insurance last fiscal year. At this time, I'd like Ms. Luann Jordan, Executive Director of Budget and Resource Allocation, to present the millage, and then she will present the budget subsequent to that. Ms. Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good evening, Mr. Hendrick, Madam Chair, board members, and staff. Truth in millage, also referred to as TRIM, requires school districts to advertise their proposed budget and millage rates annually. The district's 2022-23 millage is comprised of the general operating millage, which includes the required local effort, discretionary, and local referendum. The Florida Department of Education determines the maximum state-required local effort millage rate that must be levied by the school board to generate its local share of funding for the district. The local referendum of 0.5 mils was initially approved by the voters in 2005, 2006, and was approved for the 5th time in 2020-21 for a 4-year period. The proposed millage also includes the 1.5 mils for capital outlay. A mill refers to the rate of property tax commonly paid on the assessed value of homes and business properties. A mill equates to $1 of taxes for every $1,000 of taxable property value. The rolled-back rate is the millage rate that would generate the same amount of revenue as last year if applied to the current tax roll after adjusting for new construction. The 2022-23 proposed millage of 5.963 is higher than the rolled-back rate by 10.01%. Pinellas County's gross property tax value of approximately $125 billion is an increase from last year's value by $19.1 billion, or 18%.
Just want to make a comment or two on this slide, if I can. The taxable value has been increasing significantly, or regularly, I should say, over the last several years, and increased significantly last year. Mitigating that, however, is the constant reduction of the required local effort by the legislature. So although the taxable value is going up, our tax rates have regularly gone down over the last several years, which we'll see in the next slide, and I'll comment on that as well. Ms. Jordan?
The proposed millage rate for 2022-23 of 5.963 represents an overall decrease of 5.72% when compared to the 2021-22 total millage rate of 6.325. The required local effort millage has decreased by 10.12%.
So if you refer to, if you have your budget document, you refer to page, I believe it's 9. There's a historical chart which shows the millage rates that have been levied over the last, actually, I wouldn't say the number of years, it's back to 1970, 71. This millage rate that we're requesting that you approve tonight is the lowest millage rate, or will be the lowest millage rate approved, going back as far as 1970 and 71. In addition to that, the required local effort, coupled with my comment a moment ago, required local effort has decreased regularly over the last several years, from 2011, 2012 to present. It's gone down each and every year. So every time that required local effort decreases, it doesn't allow us to take advantage of the increased property tax value fully, as municipalities can. For example, Pinellas County government, City of Clearwater, they have the same taxable value increase that we do. However, if they set the same millage rate this year that they set last year, they're bringing in significantly more in revenue. We are limited by the legislature as to what we can levy.
The property tax revenue comparison reflects an increase in revenue of $72.4 million over last year's proceeds. This is the result of the increase in our property tax value. The required local effort proceeds are increasing by about $22 million. The proposed discretionary millage will generate about $13.7 million more. The referendum will yield an additional $9.2 million. And the capital outlay millage will generate $27.5 million more than last year.
So I just want to point out a couple of numbers on this slide, if I may. Sorry, Ms. Jordan. The number of $72.3 million is in fact the increase of the taxes that we will collect. However, it's comprised of a few different elements. If you travel up from that number above it, the first number above it is nearly $5 million. That's our local capital outlay millage levy, which is the 1.5 mils that we're statutorily allowed to levy for capital outlay and infrastructure. That money is utilized to improve our buildings, for new construction, to buy equipment, buses, and the like. It is also used to pay for our debt service payments. As you know, we have some bonds outstanding. The capital outlay levy that the capital outlay millage that we levy pays for the debt service payments on those bonds. This funding source is limited in what it can be used for by state statute 101171, and it's very prescriptive as to what the money can be spent upon. It's important to note that this money cannot be spent on operating expenses like salaries. The next number up is the $44.8 million, which is comprised of the three numbers above it. The local referendum increase of $9.2 million, as you recall, the referendum was specifically approved to help improve teachers, to recruit teachers, and so 80% of that dollar amount goes to our teachers' salaries. In fact, this year, that dollar amount will go up by approximately $359 per teacher as part of the referendum, bringing that total up to $5,734. Also, we have to share that revenue with our charter schools. The additional sharing that we'll have to provide to them this year is about $800,000. So that leaves the other two funding sources that we have, which is approximately $35 million, which is a decent amount of money. But as I mentioned, the inflationary pressures, that money will be utilized for many different things. For example, the $15 an hour wage increase, that's about a $7.2 million increase in expenditures to us estimated. Increase in health insurance costs that the board is absorbing, that's about $6.5 million. I mentioned to you in the past about the family empowerment scholarships, and for those in the audience, family empowerment scholarships are those scholarships that are available to students who wish to go to a private school and they can get state FEFP funding to pay for the education. Last year, it increased significantly by nearly $20 million over the prior year. Next year, we have an estimate that that's going to go up, along with McKay, of between $11 and $12 million. Also, our charter schools are growing, so I'm estimating charter school growth to be about $3.5 million going into next year. FRS, as I mentioned a moment ago, is going up about $4 million. And of course, we have inflationary pressures that we have to deal with as well. And of course, not the least of which is our employee salary increases. Our objective is to increase our salaries as much as possible, and much of this money will go toward that objective.
Under the proposed rate, the owner of a $200,000 home, after the deduction of the $25,000 homestead exemption, would pay $1,043.53 in school taxes. This averages out to $2.86 per day. The taxable value of property in Pinellas County reflects an increase on average of 18% for the year. The Florida legislature has set our required local effort, also referred to as RLE, to 3.215, which is a decrease from the prior year's RLE of 3.577. Some homeowners may experience an increase in their school taxes as demonstrated here as a result of an increase in property value and not an increase to our levied millage rate. Please note that the example above does not consider the benefit of the 3% Save Our Homes cap. The RLE is an appropriated amount set by the Florida Department of Education. The school board must levy this amount in order to receive state funding. It is used for the day-to-day operations such as school staff and utilities. The discretionary millage is used for general operations of the school district and to meet additional costs due to inflation. Local referendum funds are used to recruit and retain quality teachers, preserve reading, art, and music programs, and provide up-to-date textbooks and technology. The capital outlay millage is the district's primary funding source for maintenance, renovations, new construction, and equipment as advertised on July 24th. At this time, I'll turn the meeting back to the board chair to allow for public comment and for the motions necessary to adopt the millage rate.
Okay. Mrs. Hauk, do we have any speakers?
Yes, Madam Chair. We have two speakers for Agenda Item 5. We have Nancy Velarde and Andrea Dort.
I actually had put in for the next one, but this is fine. Good evening. I'm fond of a quote by our president, Joe Biden, which is simply this: don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget, and I will tell you what you value. And right now, all we are asking is for you to value your people, the ones who take direct care of the students above all else. What PCTA wants to see for Pinellas is the very same thing that I'm sure you wish to see, and that is highly qualified teachers and support professionals in all classrooms, full slates of mental health professionals to provide guidance and support for our traumatized children, as well as safe transportation to and from our schools, fully staffed kitchens to feed our children, fully staffed plant operations teams to keep our schools clean and healthy. In order to assure that these things occur, we must prioritize all the people who do the daily work to service our students as they deserve. To that end, we must also make sure employees do not fall into unpaid status when dealing with COVID. We must include COVID in the sick leave bank and keep them paid. Our profession is one of the 5 that has seen the most trauma since the pandemic began, not only in our students, but in the adults as well. Trauma is simply the reactions to significant events and the stress surrounding those events. Educators have been experiencing mounting stress for years as their workload has cumulatively increased, and in dealing with the rising number of students facing their own private traumas. The pandemic was merely the icing on a rapidly decaying cake. The exorbitant increase in local living expenses on top of the things I've already mentioned is the tipping point causing us to lose employees. Not only because it is the right thing to do, we must support them. Not only because it is the right thing to do, but to make Pinellas the district where teachers long to come to teach. We must go above and beyond the usual generosity previously shown by this district and help them make that choice to stay. We are fully aware of the constraints you face, the consistent low funding of public schools by our legislature. Florida just received the highest rating for low funding of public schools. And the fact that huge portions of that low funding must be shaved off for charter and private schools. We understand the horrible laws that they have put in place that make the veteran teachers receive 25% less of a raise than newer teachers. But even within those constraints, the people must be your priority, for without them, we have nothing left to offer our students. Thank you.
Good evening. I agree with the increase for our millage. Personally, I would prefer to have the utmost highest increase in our millage rate allowed by law, since the only way to compensate for the lack of state funding increases, because they have not increased for the last 10 years, a decade, for cost of living. So our local millage increases are necessary. They are required in order to increase our pay. And as was stated, yes, the average teacher might have received a 3.25% increase in their salary last year, but not every teacher. As stated earlier, the increase was not equal or equitable rate, due again to the horrible legislation of the Florida Senate and House that pits the fact that we have at-will employees versus veteran employees who would prefer to have a contract from year to year instead of every year not knowing for sure if we would have a contract from year to year. That's why they're called at-will employees. But I'm going to call them at-will professionals because you only hire professionals in Pinellas County Schools. So with the professionals who don't have reoccurring contractual security and the experienced teachers who are highly effective, as stated, received a 25% less increase than the highly effective at-will professionals. And we know this legislation is bad. So we try to bargain every year to compensate for these bad laws. So I just want to make sure we're aware of these bad laws, and the public should be aware of them too. The more often we say it, maybe the officials that have been elected into office will no longer be elected. So, not being someone who wants to not be considered a veteran, highly effective professional, I am not giving away that status. I do not want a 25% increase in my pay just so I can be an at-will professional. So, of course, we want to increase the millage, and you're going to do that tonight. And I want you to be looking at the budget as best you can so that we can have about a 5% average increase in our salary this year. Thank you for your time.
Are there any more speakers?
Our next speaker, I'm sorry. Our next speaker is Mark Clutho.
Okay.
Mark Clutho, Largo. As usual, speaking out of both sides of your mouth. When you first started this hearing, what did I hear? Energy costs. Yes, well, you know, it's a cause and effect thing. When you make stupid buildings, you have big energy costs. And then you're going to be putting money towards the buildings. Well, you're going to be putting the money the wrong way, towards the wrong buildings. So what does that say? This money that's going to be levied is going the wrong way. And when I say you're talking out of both sides of your mouth, yeah, well, you're talking about costs going down, but it's going up because the values of the people's property is increasing. So what's really, maybe it's the same, maybe it's not, but the bottom line is people are being ripped off because they're not getting a good value for their money. Do they really have to pay those energy costs? The money's being wasted. That's the bottom line. Because science is ignored. More to come.
There are no more speakers for this agenda item.
Okay. May I have a motion and a second for approval of the discretionary local effort millage? Okay. No, I need a second first, and then we'll.
Second one. I move that the board approve the levy. Oh, sorry. I'm a little out of sync here. I move that the board approve the levying of the discretionary local effort millage of 0.748 mils as part of the total millage to be certified to the property appraiser and the Department of Revenue.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oh, we did a second? No, I had, okay. Dudley and Cook were my, okay. Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Okay. And one no, okay. Okay, moving right along, that was 5. Okay,
I'm sorry, what was the vote?
6-1. Ms. Edmond, will you read item 5.2, approval of the discretionary local?
Mr. Dudley just read that.
Oh, okay, then you guys, okay. All right, I have a motion and a second to approve. I have a motion and a second to approve the levying of the discretionary local efforts fund mileage of 0.748 mils as part of the total millage to be certified to the property appraiser of Florida and the Department of Revenue. And that we already, okay, you guys switched. Okay, may I have a motion and a second for adoption of the total millage rates?
Yes.
I move that the board adopt the millage rates of 5.9630 mils to be set and certified to the property appraiser and to the Florida Department of Revenue. The millage rates are as follows. For required local effort, 3.215 mils. For discretionary local effort, 0.748 mils. For local referendum, 0.500 mils. For capital outlay, 1.500 mils. The total millage is 5.963 mils. This is a rate of 10.01% higher than the rollback rate.
Okay. You did the motion, but we didn't get anyone to do the second.
Correct. Now it's time for a second.
Second.
Carr? Okay. All right. This rate is 10.01% higher than the rollback rate. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Are there any noes? Okay, so it passes 6-1. All right, so now I'm going to return back to Mrs. Jordan.
Thank you. This portion of the presentation covers the district's proposed budget for 2022-23. The budget calendar is ongoing throughout the year. During the course of the year, budget updates are provided at board workshops, and monitoring is performed through budget analyses and forecasts. In the spring, we typically have a better idea of what the legislative budget is providing for us, whether we can expect an increase or a decrease in state funds. Budget steering committee meetings are held during this time frame, primarily for capital outlay requests. In July and September, we hold 2 public hearings regarding the budget and millage. As mentioned earlier, the first hearing was held on July 26th, and tonight is the second of those hearings. Certain parameters guide the building of the budget. We strive to and have been able to maintain a 63-37 ratio. This means at least 63% of all expenses are for direct instruction or in the classroom, and 37% are related to other areas, such as instructional support, plan operations, and administration. In short, at least 2/3 of all funding goes toward expenditures in the classroom. We're required by statute to maintain a minimum 3% contingency, while district policy states we are to maintain a minimum 5% contingency. This budget maintains our compliance with district policy. We also budget so as to support our core curriculum and strategic directions. The majority of our budget is in our general fund. This year it's proposed to be approximately $1 billion. The second largest funding source is capital outlay at $343 million. The district's self-insured health fund is anticipated to be approximately $170 million and represents the district's third largest fund. The total proposed budget for all funds this year is approximately $1.8 billion. Looking at the budget summary for all revenue sources, you see that about 56% of the total budget comes from the general fund. Capital outlay accounts for approximately 19%. The combined total of these two funds comprises approximately 75% of our entire budget. The new year brings several legislative changes. The base student allocation, or BSA, increased to $4,587.40. This is an increase of $214.49, or 4.9% over last year's BSA. Statewide, funding increased by $1.7 billion, or $35.2 million to Pinellas. Changes in the Florida retirement system contribution rate are projected to increase district expenditures by $4 million. Lastly, as Mr. Smith mentioned earlier, is the increase of the minimum wage to $15 per hour. Total operating fund resources are anticipated to be approximately $1 billion. Of that, about $562 million comes from local sources, which includes the half-mil referendum. $316 million comes from state sources. The Florida Education Finance Program, or FEFP, is the general fund's primary funding source. The FEFP funding formula uses a combination of state and local resources to fund education. Looking at the operating revenue budget graphically, you'll note that local sources represent about 56% of the total operating budget, and state sources account for approximately 31%. The remaining 13% comes from transfers and fund balance. The operating budget is used to fund the day-to-day operating expenditures of the district. It pays for salaries and benefits, supplies and materials, textbooks, student transportation, utilities, maintenance, and repairs. Viewing the distribution of our operating budget by object, there's little change from previous years. About 59% of our budget is spent on salaries and 22% on benefits. In total, 81% of our operating budget goes towards staffing. Capital outlay funds include revenue from both state and local sources. This fund reflects the revenue and expenditures for construction and renovation of school buildings and grounds. The majority of these funds are generated by the local capital improvement millage, which is set by law and limited to 1.5 mils. These funds may not be used for operating purposes. Rather, they may only be used for capital outlay purposes as advertised. PICO funds are not expected this year for traditional district schools. Additional funds have been provided through Certificate of Participation or COPS bonds. The lease purchase financing of capital improvements through the issuance of COPS bonds is a technique frequently utilized by Florida school districts to finance school facilities. Our proposed capital outlay budget is approximately $343 million. The budget reflects $191 million in new revenue and $319 million in proposed appropriations. The special revenue budget is comprised of two major categories of federal funds: contracted programs and food service. The total contracted programs budget is approximately $173 million. This budget starts the year off low and builds as the year goes on, as we don't recognize the revenue until it is available. Included in this category are the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, and the American Rescue Plan grants. These grants are also referred to as CARES, ESSER, and ARP. It is important to note these grants are limited, non-recurring revenue sources. Food service is a self-sustaining fund as it receives no financial support from the operating fund. Federal reimbursement and local collections are the primary revenue sources. The proposed food service budget is approximately $72 million. The debt service fund is used to account for the payment of general long-term debt, principal, and interest. This $8.5 million budget represents the debt service for COPS bonds issued by the district in 2017 and 2021. The proposed self-insured workers' compensation and liability budget of $5 million accounts for the premium revenue and expenditures associated with the district's self-insured workers' compensation and liability insurance programs. The self-insured health fund accounts for the district's premium revenue and claim expenditures with a budget of approximately $170 million. The proposed budget and all supporting documents are on file in the Office of Budget and Resource Allocation. This information can also be found online. At this point, I'll turn the meeting back to the board chair to allow for public comment and the motions necessary to adopt the proposed budget. Thank you.
Are there any speakers?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have speakers for this agenda item. Ms. Velarde, I did have a separate card for you for this item.
They told me I had to put a number on it, so I filled the second one out, but no, I don't use it.
Okay. Then our next two speakers are Shirley Patterson and L. McCullough.
Yes.
It's coming in.
Good evening. I'm Shirley Patterson, support staff. I come before you just to say that as a support staff, I do deserve a decent rated salary. With the student in college and being single parent and the rising costs of rent, just simply as a support staff, needing and deserving a decent salary. Thank you.
Hi, Board. When politicians create policies that provide significant raises to new employees while leaving experienced employees behind. They know exactly what they're doing. We cannot let politicians succeed by turning on each other. Instead, we must remain united. I mean, the board and the teachers and all the other staff of this Pinellas County Schools. We need to demand all educators be paid a professional salary that will allow us to afford to live in the community we work. Florida ranks 48th in average salaries. We know this. The average salary in Florida is $51,000. The average in the United States is $65,293. I'm a 29-year teacher. I don't make that yet. I'm not even close. 29 years. I don't even make the average for the United States. This is our allocation from the state budget. There was $137 million, Laura Hines, that was not in a category, so it could be put towards salaries. That was not put in, that's directly from the state. It's the most money we've gotten from the state ever. And that money could be put into salaries. Kevin, that's where we need to get our money from, okay? I'm really tired of listening to the bargaining unit. Paula Textel, Lori Dart, Kevin Smith tell us we don't have any money for teachers. When he says 3.25%, I got a 2% raise. I didn't even get close to 3.25. So when you say 3.25, everybody in the district but me got that raise. I'm really struggling as a teacher. How is it that I teach for 29 years and I still am struggling? After this last year, the raise I got didn't even cover the gas. Think about that. My house can sell for an ungodly amount of money, and I can pay off my mortgage and go to Pasco County, where they got a 5.4% raise, and they're going to get a referendum. Kurt Browning said he's going to steal all the teachers. He might be right. Seriously. Hillsborough, since they can't afford their teachers, they are going to look at a 4-day work week. What are we doing since we can't substantially help our teachers and educators attract educators to this area? What are we going to do? Think about it. If you can't give us a decent raise, what are you going to do? Thank you.
The next two speakers are Cindy Artunez and Mark Clutho.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to speak upon the budget, and I'm a support professional. I'm in education for about 10 years, but working for the county about 3. I would say that we just need to have a better salary. I do hold a bachelor's and so on, but I would say just a better salary overall. That's why here at my workplace is that we just need for us just to live a livable life, sustainable life. Like the previous lady is saying about we live in Pinellas County. Pinellas County is getting expensive every single year, as you can see the real estate market and so on. But I would say just put our pay raise higher, because $15, you can go to Wawa or Walmart. But I love my job, and that's why I stay. I do have enough experience and other things that I can go on, but I love my job. That's why I stay here. And also speaking about all the other people that work, because we are a team. We're all a team here. You're a team. We're a team, and we make an amazing team. I would say that and for food, and for our kids, there needs to be bigger portions, because my kids will come to me. They're like, "Oh, I'm so hungry," so I pay for food so they can have more food. Because you know what I mean. If your kid is hungry, you're gonna give them food, and so on. But also, we just need to get more resources, because remember, we are teaching our kids, but we also are teaching the person. We are building that person, because one day they're gonna be little, but as they grow, they're coming bigger and bigger and being part of more of our community as a whole. Because guess what? They're gonna be adults like you. They might even sit up here too, and also might join our profession. But so as what I'm saying is hope like help your staff so we can be there for our students, because we got to take care of one another. And also because like another thing is that how we're helping our kids, we need to help our parents, which also comes to help our community overall, because we want to be known as like the best school district, not just in the state of Florida, but in the county. Thank you so much for your time. And also I wanted to say to you is that I did read your article in the Tampa Bay Magazine. I felt like it was like personable, and I got to know you, a glimpse of you, and I thought you had a beautiful picture. And also, I had you in middle school, and I love to see that you grew and you cultivated to where you are now, and I heard great things about you too. So thank you for your time. Have a wonderful night.
Mark Lutho, Largo. Look at these figures. I'm sure you teachers will love them. For the board, you have $2.5 million. That's nice. And for the general administration, $3.8 million. That's money well spent. And then for school administration, you have $65 million. Yeah, that's good money spent. When my wife used to teach, she used to say, just let us teach. And, the administrators, they're hard at work, so they need all that money. And then we have facilities acquisition and construction, $226,500,000. Well, see, there's a big problem there. As stated before, energy costs. Well, see, when you're making all these stupid buildings, like as I mentioned before, that building up there at Clearwater High School with all that West glass, with that solar radiation bombarding it, you're going to have energy cost. You orient the building the wrong way, like this, when it should be this way. That's sheer stupidity. You don't think it's going to affect the budget? That's sheer irresponsibility. Then you have your operation of plant, $95 million. Yeah, well, cause and effect. The maintenance of plant, $21 million. And debt service, $9.2 million. Well, those costs, they just keep coming and coming. You're being irresponsible. And the plant is burning. It's a bad legacy. Bad legacy.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we have no more speakers for this item.
Okay. May I have a motion and a second for approval of the final budget for the 22-23 school year?
I move that the board
Wait,
approve the
wait,
final.
I need a motion and a second.
I move,
You move, okay.
making a motion. I move that the board approve the final 2022-23 budget as presented.
Do I have a second? Second. Dr. Carr, okay. All right, now, Ms. Heine, sorry. You're, okay. All right. We have a motion and a second to approve of the final budget. Let's take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Are there any noes? Okay, passes 6-1. Okay, may I have a motion and a second for adoption of resolution determining revenues and millage levied? I need a motion.
I move that the board adopt the required resolution as presented without formal reading.
Second.
Okay. Are there any board discussions?
Hi, thank you very much. Thank you so much. I just wanted to state the reason for my vote for no on this, and my heart goes out to the many, many people who are sitting in our audience tonight because they bring up a very, very valid point about the inflation in our county and where we live and how expensive it is to live and breathe in this county. And for those on a teacher's salary, it's becoming harder and harder each and every year. And when I look at the budget, I understand the figures, but at the end of the day, we are asking our community, not just our teachers, but our community, to increase what they're giving and increase their taxes. And there are so many in our community who were not given help during this last 2 years. We, as a school board, I believe, we were given state funds, we were given federal funds to help us through the end of the pandemic and throughout this year. Those funds are being used to support our school system in Pinellas, but there are many community members who weren't given that kind of help and are living on a very meager budget. And so I feel like at this time, it is not a good time to increase our requirements of the community. And that is the reason for my vote for no. And my heart goes out to each and every one of you who are fighting for that pay raise because it is very important with the increase in our inflation to be able to survive in Pinellas County moving forward. So that being said, thank you all very much.
Dr. Carr?
Thank you, and I am supporting this vote, and I'd like to point out on slide 21 that was shared with us about the operating budget revenue sources and the percentage that comes from our local of 55.73. So while the millage rate, because of the value of the home, tax would increase, but the millage rate itself is not increased. So if you could compare that to sales tax of an item, if I chose to purchase a sweater that cost one amount, my tax would be at the 7%. However, if I had a more expensive sweater, then my tax would be higher. Therefore, as property values go up, the cost that the person would be paying would in fact increase. So it's oftentimes misunderstood whether we're raising taxes or not raising taxes. So in order to illustrate that point, however, I think it's so important that we point out that without keeping the millage rate where it needs to be, that's a large portion of our operating budget, which is what goes to pay salaries. So I just don't want to be remiss in illustrating that the importance, and we're limited legislatively, unlike other government agencies which don't have the same limits that we do in how much we can raise the taxes. So while I think one dissent, won't break the vote, I just think it's very important that we acknowledge the importance of us as local individuals who are homeowners and how much we value our teachers, that we are willing, I as a homeowner am willing to pay my share in order to pay my teachers. And I think most individuals that I've spoken with who own homes value their teachers and therefore would be willing to keep the millage rate and recognize and understand that the value of their home has gone up, therefore their tax will increase. So I just don't want to be remiss in pointing out the substantial impact of not having millage set as high as possible.
Okay. All right. I have a motion and a second to adopt the required resolution as presented without formal reading. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes 6-1. All right, there are no additional business regarding the 2022-23 budget, so I adjourn this meeting.